Welcome to the podcast, Marshall. Thanks for being on here, man.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
You've been with Mule Deer Foundation for extensive period of time, and now are you kind of spearheading the entire Blacktail Deer Foundation opening, or just the fundraising part? And maybe kind of talk about a little bit about the introduction of the Blacktail Deer
Sure.
Foundation.
Yes, I've been with the organization since 2010, and I was hired as the regional director for Montana and Western North Dakota. And so most of my career with MDF has been being a fundraiser, recruiting volunteers, and putting on big events. Did a little bit of management the previous 2 years. And during that time period, that's when we started kind of putting together our Blacktail initiative. I'm not spearheaded this. I'm just part of that whole spear. We have Jim, who lives over there, Jim Bashel. He lives over in Prince of Wales. He's been a member of our organization for quite some time. And just kind of back up real quick there with the Mule Deer Foundation, within our mission statement is the conservation of mule deer, blacktail deer, and their habitat. And we put a lot of our focus, obviously, because where our chapters were and everything, most of the focus was on mule deer. And Jim has always been like, we need to do more. We need to do stuff with blacktail. And so he started about 2006 and 7, just as a volunteer or just as a member, was trying to get things rolling, get some things going. Steve Belinda, who's our chief conservation officer, those two have known each other for quite some time. And Steve actually came on as a full-time employee with our organization. I think it was about 2018, 2019. And he started kind of delving into that. What can we do? In 2022, I think it was, they had a meeting in Portland that was hosted by Leopold, by the CEO there. We brought in biologists and other stakeholders and stuff all the way from Alaska down to Northern California. Came in together to kind of talk about blacktail deer. What should we do? Is there things? What do we know? What don't we know? They realized we don't know a lot. And so that's when we kind of started, thinking about, what, we really need to do something like this. We need to focus on blacktail deer. And so I started going up on the volunteer side or on the fundraising side to develop chapters. And it was a little tough wearing Mule Deer Foundation clothing and being up there as people, they either wouldn't
outsider.
Talk to me or, well, I'm an outsider. Yeah, that's one. 2, there's no mule deer.
Right.
The ones that are there up in the top, over in the Canadian corner over there, it's shoot on sight.
Yeah.
And so folks weren't that very interested. With that being said, we still got a chapter started in Kodiak. We got one started in Sitka and also in Prince of Wales. And we ended up I think it was in 23, we had a couple of events and Kodiak just took off. I have 2 volunteers over there, Logan Wolf and Carl Scholl. They didn't really know each other prior to it. And those 2 have just worked so well together in that chapter. We've been having a lot of fun. And we've held 3, what I call them, gunapaloozas. They're just like a 10, 12 gun raffle. A lot of fun in 2 hours. We've had so much fun with it and going along. So what changed a lot of the stuff for me on the ground, for me, is that this last summer, it was approved that I could, have a logo and clothing that said Team Blacktail. And it still had the Mule Deer Foundation logo and stuff like that, but it said Team Blacktail. Well, I came up there, I went to the Alaskan Outdoors Council Banquet, also did a couple of little events and a bigger event in Kodiak. And I'm wearing this gear and it changed. People come up to me and they're like, what are you wearing? Tell me about the blacktail. What are you doing? What are you doing here? When I brought that back and I expressed what I had done up there, or the difference, to our new CEO, Greg Sheehan, who started in mid-October, I got back about the same time as he started. We had a conversation. Steve Belinda had a conversation, and I kind of expressed how things had kind of changed in Alaska because we did that. Talking to the other regional directors, we have one in Oregon, Washington, and one in California. When they could say Blacktail Initiative, people were a lot more open because a lot of the, where we'd have chapters or Blacktail are, we didn't have Mule Deer Foundation chapters. And so Greg Sheehan and Jim Bashel and our Chief Conservation Officer, Steve Belinda, they powwowed about this for a couple of weeks, and they came out and they said, you know what? We're going to go ahead. We're going to strike while it's hot, and we are going to develop a new foundation. So we are a division of the Mule Deer Foundation, but now we are the Blacktail Deer Foundation, BDF. When that came out in December, we announced that we cruised pretty quick. We had about 3 weeks with the Thanksgiving in the middle there. The response was incredible. We had people signing up. I think within the first 2 weeks, there was about 100, 140, 150 people had signed up as members. I came back up to Alaska in January, and we did some fun events that I can talk about a little bit later. But just coming around and talking to people, I was able to get chapters started or have organizational meetings in Anchorage, Juneau, rebuilding the Sitka, and Ketchikan all in 1 week. And we've got all those new chapters, 5 new chapters already. So it's been pretty exciting when we switched over. And the neat thing about it, what it means to people and what it means to us is that we are able to take this foundation, the monies that we raise on the ground, the things that we do, we can focus it 100% on blacktail. It's not going to get mixed with mule deer stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing because people are very familiar with Ducks Unlimited up here and Trout Unlimited up here, and those are lower 48 organizations that have a presence here. Totally trusted, totally part of the culture, but something else, something new, people can be a little bit wary of it. But now because it's Blacktail, I think that's a great marketing thing, and people recognize now more than previously the need for habitat. I think when people think about habitat, they think of the lower 48 and they think about roads and highways and the migration corridors being ruined or not being able to be accessed by private land, whereas up here everything is so public and so
Mhm.
accessible. People think that there's not really a need for any sort of conservation efforts, but as we're seeing, as we get more data about the second growth and thinning and all these other opportunities, we see that, yeah, this is definitely a spot. Even though it's super wild and even though there's a lot of access, there's still a lot of work that could be done. So having a specific organization that is geared to that, I think is going to really catch on. That'd be great.
Yeah, and we've had some people reach out to us from other organizations as well to see if we want to work with them jointly or an agency. And Scott would probably be able to tell you a little bit more about. There's one up there that we're working with a fisheries biologist where one of the streams got blown out pretty good 2 times, and now it's like a big delta. And where we are, there's second growth there, and so he reached out to Scott, or I'm not sure who reached out to, but they are they're going to go in there, they're going to do some thinning, and then they're going to take those logs and use those to rebuild those banks, so it has a good stream for the salmon to go back up
Mhm.
and stuff. So it's kind of cool in that regards too.
Yeah.
But I'm going to leave that stuff up to Jim and Scott there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a biologist.
Yeah.
So,
When you are doing the fundraising stuff, I think it's got to be, I don't know, nerve wracking. Go to certain areas and you know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to show up, or you have to cater an event that's going to match with what the people want. So, as you've been an event planner for, what have we kind of learned, or what have you learned about how to set things up and expectations and getting people there? How's that been?
well, it's my volunteers. It's the people that live there. They know their community. They know what things they like. What calibers, what products would do really well for their event. They know their people. They have all the contacts, and so I rely on them very heavily. It's one thing I've always stated, with all my chapters, is that this is your chapter. I'm here to help guide, make sure you don't break any laws, have a little fun, get people together. But it's the volunteers chapters, and that's where you have success because you're engaging them, allowing them to put their thing together. Sometimes you've heard, people go to an event or the volunteers of the event, they really don't have much say, and it kind of turns them off. That's the one thing that we do is it's their chapter. So one of the neat things about the organization is that we have a thing called chapter rewards, or monies that are raised. Our chapters actually are involved in the determination as to where to allocate those funds.
Mm.
So for instance, recently we got a phone call up in Kodiak. So they are doing a study on herd. It's a small study, just kind of a baseline study. So they're capturing and collaring deer on a Fognac and also on Kodiak. Excuse me. The Game and Fish reached out to us and said, we need some help. We lost our drone. And what we need is a drone that has infrared capability because, it's a lot easier to find the animals to get in on them. And all I did is contact our chapter chairs. I have two of them there, Carl and Logan, and said, guys, here's what they're doing. This is what they want to do with this. It's going to cost a little over $6,000. Do you want to write a check out of your bank account for it? And they were enthusiastically yes.
Hmm.
So they wrote the check, and within a week, they had that drone. The other neat thing is that, trying to bring volunteers together and get involved, get their hands dirty with projects. We've got an exciting opportunity up there in Kodiak where we've got about 15 of the members. I sent out a note to them saying, AF and G, they need help. There's only two guys up there. And they need, looking to see if some volunteers would help out with, adopting a camera, changing out the cards, make sure the batteries are good. This spring, there's going to be more opportunities, everything from picking pellets up, possibly hair, whatever other tasks or duties. So we've got 15 people who are pretty excited to help out. And that really gets you excited, gets you
Mhm.
involved and engaged.
So why did you get into huge mule deer hunter fan and blacktail, like your personal deer history? A lot of people love to hunt, but when it comes
Yeah.
to making a career that's kind of in that, I know you were in the newspaper business advertising there, but what is it about the deer on this end that's really appealing for a career?
Well, I've been a mule deer hunter my whole life. My dad was a huge mule deer hunter, even though we have whitetail here in North Dakota. And even when I worked in the newspaper in Minnesota, I hunted one time, couldn't do it, and would buy my out of state license on mule deer. So my whole experience was mule deer. Like I had mentioned 2 years ago when we had that meeting up in PO, we ended up having another meeting up in Prince of Wales, and that was an all Alaskan one. So they had folks from the university, all the different agencies were all there. I was invited to come up to listen in, to learn more about it. And I think it was a 4-day meeting. And I learned a ton about these deer just from listening to these folks. I actually got to see some out in the wild, and it's totally stunning. I just totally fell in love with it. And the more and more I learn, and I didn't know anything about subsistence either
Mm.
until that meeting and how important it was. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is really important.
Mm.
We just don't hear that stuff there. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I can't wait to do it, to hunt blacktail. I've been so busy going up there. I've been up there probably 7 times, and I'll be up there for 10 days to 14 days at a time, maybe a little longer. I have yet the chance to do any activities like that.
Just
I
work, huh?
Yeah, yeah, because of logistics and getting everywhere. And to me, it's more important to make hay when the sun shines and get out there and do these things. I'll have opportunity in the future, you know, late summers, because obviously we won't be holding any events during the summers in Alaska because
Right.
you have tourism, you got fishing, you got everything else going on. You
Yeah.
guys are making hay. That's so. But it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed. I have two cousins up there. My son moved up there a year and a half ago, so it's been. I've been getting a lot of push too from chapters that, well, why don't you just move up here? And I'm like, wow.
It's pretty awesome. Once you're nowhere is perfect, so you got to come up here, and if it's
Hmm.
southern southeast, there's a lot of rain. You go to Kodiak, you got storms. I mean, nowhere is perfect, but yeah,
No,
once you can start to see, if you can live the brochure, then you're going to be in good shape.
yeah, yeah. No, I can't wait to do some things like that. We're looking at having several events the last week of April and into May, for the first couple weeks of May. And my wife and I, we are going to, when I get done with work, she's going to fly up, and we're going to hang out for a while down in Southeast Alaska.
Nice. What about the
Yeah.
other states? I know you have a couple of chapters have opened up in Oregon,
Hmm.
Washington, California, because it's all blacktails. It's Southeast Sitka blacktail, and it's also Columbia blacktail.
Right.
So have you been able to travel to those other places and talk to some of those chapters?
Well, we actually have regional directors there. And so our Washington, Oregon regional director, he covered both states entirely for Mule Deer Foundation. Just recently, this past month here, he has now he is now exclusively focused on the Pacific Northwest coast there. Basically, we call it the I-5 corridor.
Mm,
So from Canada all the way down to the California border, and everything to the west of I-5, to develop those chapters. So he's exclusively, kind of like what I'm in Alaska, we're exclusively dealing with Blacktail Deer Foundation. And so he's already, from my understanding, within 1 month, I think he already had 3 chapters started, and he's gone full tilt into Oregon. We had our national convention here this last week, our Western Hunting and Conservation Expo in Salt Lake City. We couldn't believe how many people were from Washington and Oregon and California that were there. And they saw our booth and they came right up to us right away. So they've got a lot of people that are extremely interested. So I think you're probably going to see several chapters popping up in those areas there.
Yeah, I lived in California for a little bit out of college, and you had a hunting contingent, but it was largely, and I guess, overshadowed by your stereotypical California whatever. But it didn't seem like there was the same level of antagonism. But now it just seems like there's, especially in some of the, in like Washington, like some very aggressive anti-hunting efforts. So I think a lot of people are really
Mhm.
relieved to see maybe a blacktail specific organization that's going to kind of help out with that. It probably makes you feel really, really happy to be in Alaska, so you don't have
Yes.
to deal with some of those other issues.
No, no, no. I don't know. No, it's well, with that being said though, Alaskans are very political. And with our organization, we're not a very political organization at all.
Mhm.
Our focus is conservation of habitat. We try to avoid getting into those things. And there's a lot of advocacy groups out there and everything. And at times we've had to, get on board and sign on something because it did truly affect our species. But that's the main thing with us is I let our volunteers know immediately that we're not getting into some of the messes that you see out there and things like that. But so and that's one of the kind of neat things too is our organization, we put 87% of the money we raise on the ground because that's what our focus is, and it makes me pretty proud.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of the things, especially now with all the cuts that are being made and the wasteful spending on the part of the government. People really are asking questions about where's the money going. So that was going to be one of the questions I asked, is how much of the money goes to it.
Mhm.
So how do you is that kind of an industry standard with a lot of these conservation groups? Like, you don't have to say this company or this organization does less or more, but how does that foundation gauge enough to be able to have employees, but also provide and make it meaningful to the chapters?
We're a small organization. we're we're not very big. We do rely getting grants, writing for grants, and the most the important part is the fundraising on the ground because we utilize those dollars to help leverage things. So we may, for every dollar that we raise, we will leverage it another $3 to $5. So if an organization or agencies say, they're gonna we're gonna grant you $100,000, but we need 25,000 to match. That's where it's really important with our chapters. That's where we put our focus on, and especially in these days and times right now where things are on hold. Nobody knows what's going on right now
Right.
with regards to stuff. It's even going to be more important that we establish these chapters and we rely not exclusively on grants or anything like that. We have to really work hard to raise those funds on the ground.
Mhm. So where do you find these grants as the fundraiser? You got to be very creative with where you get funds and how to be really involved in that stuff. So what type of agencies are giving money? Is it federal grants, nonprofits? Like, who are you
Across the
asking?
board. It is across the board.
Anywhere. Is that like
Yeah,
you
it
have
is. I mean,
contacts? Are you Googling this stuff, or is it a
um,
database or?
I'm not in that realm. That's more of a question for Scott and Jim, but I have gotten involved a couple times out here where, for instance, the state that I'm in when I was covering North Dakota, we had an outdoor heritage fund. And I wrote my first grant request, and it got denied because there was one word that they didn't like in there.
Oh, do you
Prescribed
remember the
prescribed burn. That's two words. Prescribed burns. And I went back and I visited with a few of the decision makers on that board, and they said, if you just change that, pull that out, and do this, you should be fine. So the next time it came up, I did that, and it was unanimously accepted, and I had a $485,000 grant. We work with, specifically what I've helped with is NIFWIF, National Wild, let's see, it's National Fish and Wild, let's see, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And what they focus on different things throughout the country, but where I was when I was the RD out here, it was antelope and sage grouse. Well, the same things that you need to do to improve habitat for them are the same things that you do for mule deer.
Mm.
And so we were able to write, and Steve did the lead on that one and wrote that, and I added a few little things, and he took the lead on that one. Steve's one heck of a grant writer. A lot of our conservation teams, that's one of their duties is to write grants to identify opportunities. Us on the ground, our lives have changed a little bit too, where we are getting more active, not just doing banquets and raffles and stuff, but also identifying people that will make donations, companies, partnerships. I've worked with Bobcat, for instance, where they've literally shipped down several pieces of equipment from payloaders to, excuse me, to Bobcats to all the different attachments and track hose, everything. Those are partners that we also look for too, because we can utilize what they do. So for instance, let's say that value that Bobcat sent down on 2 semi loads and the time that we used it and everything may have been worth $60,000. We can use that toward match for these grants.
Mm.
And then it's other organizations, other companies, businesses, they see that and they've reached out and said, hey, we'd like to get involved. And so I would say probably in the last 2 years that exposure that we've been doing has increased dramatically of people reaching out to us and wanting to help us. And Steve Belinda kind of quoted it. We're a small organization. And so people are amazed at what we've been able to do on the 48 down here. And they're saying, he would always come back and say, you know what, we look like a lightweight, but we're hitting like a heavyweight.
Mm.
And that's our plan as well with BDF is to come up there, create relationships so we can do even more. In my short time that I've been up there on Kodiak, we've developed a really good relationship with Big Ray Sporting Goods.
Mm-hmm.
They, the last January and then this January, they made donations to us based off of their big buck contest. But since we switched over to BDF in December, Jesse, one of the owners, he came to me and says, now that you're at Blacktail Deer Foundation, you are going to see a higher partnership with us.
Hmm.
And so we're really excited because they have 3 locations, one in Kodiak and one in Anchorage and one in Fairbanks. We developed a relationship with Double Shovel Cider. Very lucky there. Gideon, I contacted him. He actually mentioned to me when I was up there at an event last spring, and he said, I'd like to do a little bit more for you guys. I'd really like to help you. I like what you guys are doing. And I asked him in August, I said, would you be willing to maybe make a cider for us? Blacktail cider. And then maybe, 15, 20% of the profits that you would donate to the chapter to help them with their banquet to increase their efficiencies. And he goes, yeah, I could definitely do that. He goes, I got this stuff going in a rye barrel right now. I'm trying this out with a rye whiskey barrel. And so when I was up there in October for their event, I went over was talking with Gideon, and he took me in the back room there and poured some out, and we were drinking it, and it tasted like a Chardonnay at that time.
Hmm.
And so January, we had a big event where we brought in the game and fish department to talk with all those 15 people, what they're going to do in orientation, but ended up with like 85 people in there because they wanted to know what's going on, what we're doing and everything. Well, Gideon gets up on the ladder to introduce and thank everybody. And then he talks about this cider, Blacktail cider. And he goes, he is so excited by what's happening in the community, the buzz, the talk, how members are actually helping, helping with the survey and everything. He says, we are going to donate 100% of the profits of this ride to that chapter. So developing relationships like that, identifying who stakeholders are, and it even comes from individuals as well.
Mm-hmm. So what, if you're looking at it, I don't know if this is really a question that you can really answer, but as far as like a healthy chapter, what does a healthy chapter look like? Is it sheer numbers? Do you know that for every like 10 people, there's going to be like 1 or 2 active members, or what, as far as chapter dynamics go, what have you kind of observed over your time?
I'm kind of a numbers nerd sometimes. I've got it figured out as to what an average is. Okay, so let's start with membership or to get a chapter started. I need 1 person. 2 would be better. 4 would be great. 6 would be awesome. But I've started chapters with 1 person. And because that 1 person will get a few of their friends to come help. And so we'll do these smaller events like I talked about, the Gunapalooza. You only need 3 people to help you. When you get to a banquet, that's when you're going to need, 12 to 20, depending on the size of the banquet. And a volunteer there, you have two volunteers. You have your volunteer that is pretty engaged with the development of the event itself, identifying what items or merchandise that we're going to have there for raffles, for live auction, for whatever. They're dealing with the caterer, getting the place set up. They're making a lot of those decisions, and I help them with that. And that can be, two people all the way up to 8 people. So I've had some chapters that have been around for 25 years. I got, 8 to 12 people on the committee. Not everyone shows up to every meeting, but you got a lot of people there. Then you have your volunteer, not your committee guy, but your volunteer they will help when asked. They'll be there on game day. I'll come help set up. I'll tear down. I'll run a table. Some that, yeah, give me some posters. I'll go do that. Because everybody's life is different. They got busy things. You got children, you got sports, you got this, you got that. And if the more people you have in there, the better for volunteers, that outlying volunteer. Your committee, I think a good committee can run, well, we've obviously proved it up in Kodiak with 2 individuals, but when you get to that banquet committee, you get at least 4 people to 6 people minimum. You're doing well. You'll do fine with that. We also know that the average volunteer will probably bring 20 people to that event, friends and family. So if you got, 10 volunteers, you're most likely going to have 200 people at your event, probably more.
Hmm. What
So,
about chapters kind of working together? I'm sure it's a little easier in the lower 48 where you can drive, but do you ever have instances in which chapters kind of get together to do a group sort of event or combine
yes,
efforts
they
on
can.
things?
Yeah, they've done that. And so I just started that chapter up in Matsu Valley, up in Wasilla, Palmer area, and at the same time, a chapter in Anchorage. And, so when we had the orientation meeting or, trying to build it in Anchorage, Spencer from Palmer, he came down and, to be at that same meeting and listen and learn because he works in Anchorage too. And he's like, well, I can do both, and so we've had these chapters down here. I've had chapters that are 50 miles apart, whatever. And they'll go up and help them during game day. They'll come up and they'll, you know, buy raffle tickets, hang out, and vice versa. They come back. We also do that we've had relationships with other organizations, where we'll go buy a table, the volunteers pool their money together and they buy a table, go over there and support them. And then here they come back and come to our table, come to our event too. So, and that's really important thing to bring up too, is just that these are conservation organizations and stuff. A lot of us are trying to do similar things. And some of the things that we do will benefit other species as well as what they will do could benefit other species.
Mhm.
So like I talked about a little bit ago about the fisheries and us thinning the trees out for the benefit of the deer.
Mhm. Yeah, my wife's an ecologist, and so I knew all this stuff intellectually that everything kind of works together in harmony, but you kind of look at things a lot differently once you kind of see the entire cycle. Now everything not only just works together, but is dependent on each other, and you can't really remove an element of something without it impacting everything else. And so it's really interesting to see, and it's good to see like these complementary organizations and these efforts to do things that benefit more than just one species, and that's keeping the habitat good is good for multiple species.
The other part of it is too is getting other chapters involved. Fairbanks. I have interest up in Fairbanks to start a chapter. And I just talked about Wasilla and Anchorage. They don't have blacktail there,
Mhm.
and people are like, well, why are you going to be up there? Because we have blacktail hunters.
Yeah,
Alaska's a big state. It's a big state. We need a lot of chapters. There's a lot of things to do. And again, Scott and Jim can tell you a little bit more about the acreage, for the second growth and all that type of stuff. Kodiak's habitat is incredible. I don't know what we could really do. You know, with that being said, you still have to bank stuff away because something could happen a year from now, 2 years, something, that could affect the landscape that needs repair or whatever. And so I like to have a lot of chapters work together as well. So yes, I've got this money in my bank account here. Doesn't mean you have to spend it in your backyard. Your backyard might be fine this year,
Mhm.
but you know what? We need a lot of help over here. And so I've always kind of talked to people and say that, you're a hunter. Where do you go fishing? Where do you go hunt this? Where do you go hunt that? With this species, that species, that species. The entire state's your backyard,
Mhm.
and so we have to focus and, expand where we're going to put our stuff, identify the projects that we get more bang for our buck, much more benefit, much more needed. So that's the thing is we bring projects to them. Sometimes a volunteer will have a discussion with somebody from one of the agencies and say, hey, they're looking at possibly doing this project here and bring us in. And that's so.
Mhm. So how would someone get involved if they or just to get some information about it? Blacktaildeer.org, but then also like do you have social medias? Are there events coming up? Are there meet and greets? Are there Zoom calls? Like how can people kind of either dip their toe in or jump all the way in?
Well, first they can contact me. So yeah, they can call me. I'm on the website there, blacktaildeer.org, and click on your state. If you're listening, not Washington and Oregon and stuff, click on your state. You can look to see if there's a chapter close to you, but there's a regional director close. And that's first thing to do is contact them. Secondly, we are on social media. And so there's a national Blacktail Blacktail Deer Foundation page on Facebook. And then, for instance, in Alaska, I have an Alaskan Blacktail Deer Foundation. So that's all about what's relevant to us up here, where our chapters are, promoting our events. Keep an eye out for that. Just letting you know before I'm coming up to the show in Anchorage, the Great Alaskan Sportsman Show, which is the March 7th through 10th, I think it is, or 8th through 10th, somewhere in there. 7th through the 9th. That's what it is, 7th through the 9th. So I'm going to be in Anchorage. So it's an opportunity for people up there that want to stop in and visit with me. I have a booth up there. But I'm also going to fly up prior to that, a couple days ahead, I'm going to fly up to Fairbanks. And I'm going to do kind of a meet and greet. Sometimes I call them beers for deer. Come on out and hang out, let's have a beer, visit and talk about our organization, how you can take part in it. So I'll be doing that. Might be going to Homer too. So if you go to that site, you're going to see me punching that stuff in there and where the events are going to be too. But the first thing is just reach out.
Mhm. Are you going to be in Southeast at all in the next couple weeks, months, or year?
Oh yeah. So I just came through there in January. I did that old milk run, from Juneau to Sitka to
Yep.
Ketchikan and home. So that's where we established these chapters back in January here. So we've been doing meetings over Zoom and stuff, visiting on the phone. We are planning to do events in the Southeast between the last week of April through about the second week in May or so. I think right now Sitka's got the latest one, May 11th, which is a Sunday. And then I tentatively Prince of Wales might be on the 9th of May, but we're just kind of working on those dates right now. Again, most of my events, they're going to take place between January, or basically, let's go this way. They'll take place probably about mid-September through May
Yep.
because nothing else is going to happen in between.
For sure.
So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
great. Was there anything else you like to add about anything or the foundation or final pitch here?
Well, I just really like folks to, get on that social media. If you have, check us out there, go to our website. But if you really have some good questions that you want to ask, you want to find some stuff out, or you have interest, how you can help, pick up the phone and call me. Send me an email. I'd appreciate it.
Awesome. Well,
Talk to
thanks again. Really
particular.
appreciate it. Now that the baby's getting a little bit older, hopefully I'll be able to come to some of the events when you're in Ketchikan.
Oh yeah, we'll expect it.
Yeah.